Hi, my name's Lance. I used to ride for a couple of cycling teams, and now I do triathlons for fun. One thing I see online a lot is a lot of people asking, how much do you have to spend to get into triathlons? And I'm going to say, you can spend as little or as much as you like. What I want to do is I want to break it down into four categories for you. These are four categories that are budgets for all ranges. Our first one is going to be the free 99 category. This is someone who is looking to spend no money or very little money to get involved in triathlons. Our next category is going to be the bang for buck category. This is someone who's willing to invest a little bit, but they want to be able to get the best bang for their buck. Our third category is starting to get into the performance. This is going to be our budget performance category. This is someone who is willing to invest a little bit more. They're trying to maybe eke into those marginal gains, and they are willing to spend that money to get that extra performance. And then our fourth category, that is going to be our dentist money category. This is someone who basically has an unlimited budget, can buy the best equipment, can get whatever they want. That's that category. So let's go look into this a little bit more. I'm shooting this video off cuff, so ignore the lack of professionality, but the information here I think is really good. So one of the first things that most people think is about the bike. So what was our first category? That was our free 99. So what you want when you're doing free 99 for a bike is you want a free or cheap bike. This, for instance, is a Indiana University Little 5 bike. I bought this off a friend for $75. It is a single speed bike with coaster brakes, so no brakes up on the hoods, and it's a steel frame, pretty heavy, and of course, again, single speed. But for $75, this is a bike that you can do, well, depending on the braking requirements, you could do some races with this bike. Some races, like the Chicago Triathlon, they actually provide, I think you still have to rent them, but you can get the city bikes that are out on the sidewalks. You can use that in your race. So I don't know what the rental price is, but you can use that. Or if you just borrow a bike off a friend for free, that is your free on the free 99 category. Next, we're going to move over to the biking bang for buck category. Okay, well, sorry I lied. We're not moving on to the next category. Another in the free 99 is if you have a bike, you can use it. So I have this mountain bike. It's not going to be ideal, but you can use a mountain bike for triathlons. Maybe you want to just replace the tires to something that has a little more or a little less rolling resistance. But this is absolutely a bike that you can use in a triathlon. Okay, so back from the garage. So back to our next category, the bang for buck category. And something like that is going to be something like this. This is my Trek SLR, Super Light Alpha Race something. I forget the name exactly. You know, it's modeled off for the Lance Armstrong Postal Service kind of livery. And so the thing about this bike is this is a racing bike from like 2006-ish era. So it still has the rim brakes, but the spokes have these Bontrager, kind of non-symmetrical design. It's got, well, I changed the rear cassette. It used to have a pretty tight racing cassette, but now it has more of a climbing cassette. But I purchased this bike. This was back in COVID. I purchased it for about $700. I, of course, overpaid for it because it was COVID, but I needed a bike at the time, and I really loved the livery on this thing. And so that's what I got. So for, $400, $500 kind of dollars, this is your bang for buck range. So It is a road bike. I can use it for any kind of road biking endeavor. If I want to go on a group ride, I can use it. I did at one point, I'll try and put a picture up, put a aero bars, clip-on aero bars. I got them from a secondhand store for about $12. And so I made this into a pseudo triathlon bike. And that is a pretty good entry into our bang for buck. You're looking for a road bike, something that can do other things, but will absolutely work. It's got all the gearing, it's got the braking, and, easy to roll tires and all that. So this is a great entry into our bang for buck category. Coming back to the garage for the next entry, and this in our biking entry is the budget performance. And this is actually where I ride in. I'm looking to get some of those marginal gains, but I'm not trying to drop a ton of money on, 1 or 2 watts. So this is my bike. I ride the PR5 Quintana Roo mechanical, and I have the Chinese carbon fiber elite wheels, 88 millimeter. So it has the cockpit. I 3D printed this aero bottle cage, so I can place a bottle in here as I'm out on the hoods. Mechanical shifting, rim brakes, but the rim brakes on a tuck in real nice under that. Just have old pedals from my road cycling days. And this bike cost retails, I'd say, in this configuration for about $3,000 or so dollars. Now I, shopped around and was able to get it. I think I paid about $2,000 for this entire setup. And this has served me really well on a lot of races. I've traveled with this thing. I've, gotten in some of the bigger races where there's like 4,000 people. My bike split is in like the top 5%. So on a bike with Chinese wheels and, not crazy tires or anything, this bike has served me really well to not podium, but to get up there in the faster groups. So our next category is that dentist money category. You could also call it professional racer category, or I don't know, anything like that. So I'm going to put some things on the screen. You've got those high-end, like integrated cockpits. You've got like really crazy aero frames. You got full-on like solid disc wheels in the rear. High-end components. These can be very expensive. We're talking 10,000, 15,000. I don't know. There's probably some that are even more. But in this range is like, $15,000 range for a bicycle. So you absolutely do not need that if you're starting out cycling. But that is something that if you have the disposable income for, or if you are, trying to go from fourth place to like third or second, you're trying to really eke out those marginal gains to give you that little bit to get on the podium or whatever, then that is something that you can strive for or purchase or use. So that is our dentist money budget option. So that wraps up our biking options. Now, this is a triathlon, so it is swim, bike, run. So let's go into swimming as our next one. For our free 99, go and find that box of old clothes you had from high school and pick out your swim trunks. If you don't have swim trunks, you could swim in shorts or borrow a Speedo or something. It really doesn't matter. Just anything that can get you in the water and not arrested for indecent exposure. For our bang for buck category, you could get a Speedo or swim jammers or something that, can be used for regular swimming. When I first started triathlons, I was living in Silverthorne, Colorado. And in Silverthorne, we have the outlet shopping center where it's discounted brand or it's name brands, but at discounted prices. Usually they're kind of offcuts and whatnot. So I picked up this Pearl Izumi tri suit for, I want to say it was about $40, $50 or something. So you can see it's definitely, deteriorated a little bit from chlorine bleaching, but this is what I usually swim in when I am just training. But something like this is a great option as a budget suit in our bang for buck category. Now, my current race suit, much like my bike, falls into that budget performance category. So I have this Zone 3 tri suit, but I purchased it from a possibly sketchy website and at way below retail. So this was either a Chinese knockoff or there's a couple of weird like seams around it. So what I think is this is a gray market, not a black market, but a gray market, fell off the truck. Basically, it would have ended up in a outlet store because the, stitching was a little weird. But somehow along the way, it ended up at this retailer and I purchased it online for well below what this should cost. But it's a tri suit. It's nice. And it's got all the aero fabric and everything. So if you were to get a more high performance suit, you may have this exact same suit in our dentist category. Now, obviously, with swimming, we can't talk about swimming without talking about goggles. In our free 99 category, you can either not use goggles at all or borrow some, of course. These here, these TYRs, I picked up. I believe they were about $8 being sold at my local rec center. I picked these up when I first started swimming. You can see they're clear, so they don't offer much sun protection. But if you're looking for something to protect your eyes and keep them open underwater, something like these will absolutely fit the bill. I do recommend moving up to our bang for buck category. The Vanquishers, Speedo Vanquishers, are pretty much the tried and true swimming goggles. I have a couple because, I'll use them for a bit and they'll wear out. But reflective, much better seal. So this is kind of our bang for buck. And I'd also say budget performance because you can get, I've got different icon or different designs in these. I like to keep them in the case still because they just pack up easier. But they're basically the same designs. So these really fulfill our best bang for buck and our budget performance. Now, they do have other goggles that have, if you're trying to go into that doctor money territory or dentist money territory, where they have like in-screen displays or just, custom, fitting masks or different things. So that would be more of our dentist money type of territory. But honestly, I've been using as soon as I started taking things a little more seriously. These are like 15, 20, 25 bucks. These are definitely the way to go, even if you are just a beginner. I recommend just skipping straight to this stage. Swim caps aren't really necessary, but if you'd like to, you can pick up something like this TYR that I picked up from the rec center. It's just your kind of standard rubber swim cap. I don't remember how much it costs, maybe $5, just if you want to get into swimming. But as you can see, a lot of these are branded, and these are races that I have done, and they give you free swim caps. So for free 99, you can either not buy one and get one for free at the event, or purchase one for pretty cheap. Then when we get into our budget, bang for buck, there's kind of two styles of swim caps. So these here are silicone caps, and they are a lot more comfortable and a lot nicer. Whereas this, kind of the traditional rubber swim cap, I can't even get this apart one-handed. So yeah, moving into, a slightly nicer swim cap, if you like. They're just way more comfortable, stretchier, softer. So yeah, if you want to get into that kind of budget uh, performance, like I'd say this is probably our doctor money one, kind of high end. I keep saying doctor, I keep meaning dentist. More high end, more comfortable, softer, and then yeah, your traditional cheaper kind of ones moving up into. So yeah, that's swim caps. And then of course we get into running. Now, if you're going for free 99, you can just take whatever shoe and you can wear it. If you have an old pair of running shoes from high school or kind of slightly more athletic sneakers, wearing something like that would definitely be ideal. That definitely moves into our bang for buck category. If normally you kind of wear a slightly more athletic shoe, then maybe you want to buy one that's a little bit more running oriented. Once we start getting into like our budget performance, that would be a very kind of dedicated running shoe, maybe something you don't wear every day, but something that works, for running. I, for instance, have these Hokas. I think they're the Mach 5s, if I remember right. They're pretty lightweight. Obviously, you can see I've worn them down quite a bit. I've replaced the laces with some elastic strings just so that it's easier. And I have a foot pod tracker so that I can use them with Strava Run, or not Strava Run, Zwift Run. It also tracks my Strava, but lets me run on the treadmill in digital space. So something like these costs about $100. Now, if you want to get into like the super high-end shoes, there's of course always things like the Nike Vaporflies or the ones with the carbon soles that are super responsive, and you put a ton of force into them and they spring back. Those are usually in the $200 plus range. So that's your kind of doctor money as far dentist money as far as your upper echelon of running shoes. So there we have a lot of it. The equipment you need to swim, to bike, and to run, and our categories at every single price point. So you can see how if you want to do this for no money, you could theoretically do it for no money as far as the equipment side goes. Now, of course, we have to talk about training and races themselves. So the training itself is, exactly that. It's training. So when you are going to run, you can usually just go out your front door and go run. You might want some trainer shoes and some race day shoes, but if you're on that free 99 budget, then you want to keep it free 99. Bang for buck, probably some everyday shoes for running. For budget performance, you have specific running shoes, and then you get into the dentist money, and maybe you have specific training shoes as well as specific race day shoes. So that is running training. Bike training is pretty similar. You have a bike. You can use it to ride. You go out your front door and you're riding. Now, you might want specific, like a certain kit that you train in. You might just ride in street clothes. Like, that's fine as well. If you're in that free 99. Then you get into your bang for buck. You might have a cycling kit or maybe a cheap triathlon kit. That you use. Then your bang for buck, you might have, or budget performance, you might have a training kit with a race day kit, or you have a slightly nicer kit that you use for both. And then, yeah, you get into your dentist money for cycling. Maybe you have dedicated cycling, tires on your bike. So maybe you have a dedicated kit. There's all sorts of training equipment. You guys saw earlier, I had my Trek, my road bike hooked up to the trainer. That's an additional cost. I feel like that trainer probably falls into that budget performance category again. There's ones that are more expensive. I don't pay for a year-round subscription on that. I just pay during the winter months. So it kind of doesn't get used for like half the year. but then I'll pay 20 bucks a month or whatever it costs to, ride during the wintertime. So again, if you're trying to do it cheaply, that's something you just don't need. Then probably the hardest one for a lot of people is the swimming. Now, free 99 if you're in an apartment and you have a tiny little pool, you could swim laps back and forth in that tiny pool. You could tie a rope around your ankle, tie it to the fence, and then just swim without going anywhere. That is a way to train. If you don't have an option of that, maybe your friend has a pool. Maybe you can use that. Or for me locally, I've pretty much always had a lake near where I live. So I didn't actually learn to swim in the pool. I learned to swim in a lake, which is great because most triathlons are actually lake events. So if you can go out to a lake and swim and train, that is probably the best training you can get, as well as one of the cheapest. I do want to say if you are swimming in a lake, you probably want to get one of these. This is a swim buoy. It attaches around your waist and it floats. So as you're swimming along, it's floating behind you. It's great for in case you have issues in the lake and you can float. Between this and a wetsuit, I actually feel very safe not having someone spot me in the water. But the first couple of times I went out, I took my roommate and she was out on a paddleboard and I still had this just in case. So definitely be safe in the water. With the wetsuits, we're going to talk about that next. Now, a wetsuit is absolutely not necessary. If you're in that free 99 category, you can either not use a wetsuit. Often some of the bigger races have wetsuit rentals, or if you can borrow it from a friend. But just know everyone pees in their wetsuit. So do you really want to be using a wetsuit that someone else peed in? If you're trying to do it free, that might be worth it to you. Now, there are different types of wetsuits. So I used to live in Tahoe, California, and swim in the lakes in Lake Tahoe. So what I had when I lived there, because that was basically snowmelt, was just a cheap scuba diving wetsuit. This is actually 6 millimeters, so it's super thick. But something like this, if you're trying to do bang for buck, is something that's possible. The extra thickness, most races won't allow a 6 millimeter because you'll bob like a cork. But something like this can be used. The problem is it is thick and stiff, and like if you're trying to reach for a swim, it's a little bit more difficult. But that is something that you can use for cold weather, and I've definitely swam many miles in this wetsuit, so it is possible. Once we get into our budget performance, something like this Roka Maverick, you can see the material is more like a seal skin, very slippery through the water. The arms are much more maneuverable and thin. It still has, some thickness to it, so it'll still help you float. The release has this better zipper that you can zip and unzip with, so it's easier to get in and out of. So something like this. This one was probably around the like $50 mark. This one I think was over 100, maybe like 120, 150. I don't remember. I think I got this one on sale. But it's a lot more maneuverable, especially stretching for swimming versus something like this. And then if you're getting into that dentist money, you can get something like this that is just more. So I think those go upwards of like $1,000, and you can get something similar to this. But again, you're trying to go after those diminishing returns. So you absolutely don't need a wetsuit, but having some sort of budget performance, I definitely recommend as the way to go there. But depending on your race, if you're swimming in Cancun, you might not need the added insulation from a thicker, heavier suit. But if you're swimming in frigid, barely above 30-degree water, more insulation versus, maneuverability may be preferable. But now back to the swim training itself. So we talked about you can go and swim in a local pool for free if you have a pool. Uh, Swim in a neighbor's pool, swim in a local lake, or if you're trying to go like budget, bang for buck, if you have like a YMCA membership, something like that, so you can work out as well as swim. That is an option. Our local university has an outdoor pool. You can get a membership there to just swim. I work for the university, so I get a discounted price on the gym rec center membership. So I can go to the gym and use many of our world class pools for about $30 a month. So it's very affordable for what I get. Getting into like the high end dentist money training, you of course can pay for private trainers, for coaches, can get access to like private pools and stuff like that. So those budgets can obviously go, through the roof if you're paying top dollar for, top resources and, an expensive gym membership, an expensive pool membership, an expensive trainer and a nutritionist and all that kind of stuff. So that, obviously the price goes up. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is races. That's kind of our last expense. If you're trying to do free 99, some races allow you to volunteer and they will do membership or not memberships, but they will give you entries. I know specifically this isn't triathlon, but for Spartan races in particular, there's a lot of obstacles, a lot of things. They need a lot of volunteers. So when there was a Spartan race that was happening near me, I looked into that, and they had a specific category just for the volunteers. So you would help everyone else out, run the race, do the thing, and then afterwards, the volunteers would then get free entry into that race. Where I used to live, Big Blue Adventure out in Tahoe, they have kind of a race series. They have multiple races in the area. So what I've done is I volunteered and I was a lifeguard for them. They gave me a paddleboard. I basically went out on the paddleboard, stayed behind the swimmers, and helped anyone who needed it. And that earns me credits that I could then use towards discounted race entries. So if you did one or two races, you volunteering, you could get a free race entry. So in your free 99 category, there are ways to actually get in for free. You can also, sometimes they do sponsorships where not sponsorships, but charity. So you are running for a charity, you get an entry for that and, people are pledging money for you to do it. And so you can get in free that way. For our bang for buck, usually a local race, race entries can be anywhere from like $20, $30, $40 upwards of, I've seen some that are like 200 plus if you're trying to get to some of the fancier races. And that's just the race entry, just to like get across the starting line. So doing a local race that is cheaper is a pretty good way of getting bang for a buck. Once you get into our budget performance category, you're paying a little bit more to do races that cost a little bit more. For instance, I'm relatively close to Chicago, but that's still, a multiple hour drive to get there. I don't have to fly there. When I lived back on the West Coast, I had to fly there. And that's probably more in our dentist territory. But we'll get to that in a bit. So for me, if I wanted to go to that race, I think our entry fee is around $200-ish. I would then have to pay for gas there and back. But luckily for me, I have a family member who lives in Chicago, so I do not have to pay for hotel rooms. Now, the thing is you have to get to a race, usually the Friday before, pick up your packet, If the race is, or you could pick it up on Saturday if the race is on Sunday. So you have to get there at least the day before, pick up your packet, get everything checked out, ready to go. Drop off your bike in transition if they allow that the night before. So you need at least 1 or 2 days of lodging when you're there. So for me, again, I just pay gas money to drive up there. I have lodging for free. Obviously, I'm still like paying for food and all that. And then like the train ticket to get to the race the day. So that's kind of our budget performance category. So we're looking at maybe $300, $400, $500 to just do this race. And if you're doing like the Nice triathlon over in France, and you have that dentist budget and you want to buy a first class ticket to get over there, you want to buy a high end hotel lodging for the turn it into a week vacation, stay there for a week because you got to get acclimatized to the it's their nighttime when it's our daytime, so you got to get used to the time zone. You got to acclimatize. You got to make sure you bring your own food so that you don't get food poisoning or whatever. So yeah, that budget can absolutely skyrocket, cost you tens of thousands of dollars. If you're going to Kona, like they don't have, I mean, I guess they're getting away from Kona, but in the past, that was very expensive to go out there and travel and lodge, and everything was even more expensive than it normally is. So yeah, high end, a single race can cost you $10,000. But if you volunteer, maybe you do the race for free. So this really is a sport for anyone. If you just want to try it, you want to get in, just see what it's about, you can absolutely do a race spending $0. Now you might have to hitchhike to get, to the next town over where they're holding the race. But theoretically, you can do an entire triathlon spending no money at all. Or if you want to spend $15,000 on a bike, buy the best tri-suit you can, buy the best wetsuit, you want to fly to the most expensive races, do the big events, a single race could cost you upwards of 30, 40, I mean, I'm going to even say $100,000 if you are just, completely balling out and buying the most expensive stuff, first class tickets, taking a week or two off work. Like, so that kind of is the range. Literally anything is possible. So I would say for me personally, I mostly fall into that budget performance category. You can spend a lot at first to get into it and then not spend a lot moving forward, or you can spend a little and then spend a little more, or you can just spend a lot. There's really a lot of different possibilities, and you can do it however you want. There's really no wrong way of doing it. If you have any questions, anything I forgot or missed, leave it in the comments down below. I think I covered pretty much everything without going too in detail. So yeah, I would say I am personally in the more budget performance category, but there are some things that I do on the cheap, and there are some things I do expensively. And it's just whatever works for you. So yeah, if you're looking to get into triathlon, here's your cue to say you can do it. So good luck and see you out there.